All right,
Okay.
guys, so thank you for joining me, Shaz and Robin of the Lake Surfistas. Yes.
Hey.
For those watching the video, there's a heart. Yeah, there's 3.
Okay.
So welcome, you guys. So we have here Robin and Shazia from the Lake Surfistas. So maybe, okay, so let's just talk about what Lake Surfistas is. And then, so whoever wants to start or start the explanation, and maybe, you know, Robin can start, Shazia chimes in, however you want it to work.
Sure. Yeah. Chazzy, do you want to go?
No, you start, and then
Okay.
maybe,
We'll
you start, because you were there at the very beginning.
We'll go by timeline here. Round squares, good idea. So it actually started off as a get-together of women surfing the Great Lakes and paddling back in 2014 with a small event called Ladies of the Lake event. And that was down at one of the cottages in off Fire Lane 22 in Lake Erie. Andy Holland was kind enough to let us use his cottage for this inaugural gathering of about 30 or 40 women to come and surf. And there was surf that day, and it was such a organically chill event. There were children hanging out in the fire. There was the feels of the air and the waves and the sun and the October weather and the cozies, and this was the first time I had ever seen this many women on the Great Lakes gathered before, because before that there weren't a lot of women, but at that point it had grown so much that Lisa Parks and I, who is the artist of a couple of these things up here, these waves up there.
Yeah, they're so cool.
Yeah, she's like, let's do this. And I had been wanting to do something like that for a while, having worked at Surf Ontario, and actually physically seeing more people come in and become interested in it. So we had it, and it was the most amazing time. And then after that, we were like, well, we need to keep this going. This was so fun. This was so good. It was so wholesome. It left a lot of women in these happy tears of community that we couldn't stop. So we kept going. And then eventually Lisa's life took her out west, and she's like, well, you guys have to, you got to keep going it all, keep going. Robin, you've been there, and you've been here for so long, you have to keep this going. So I was like, yeah, absolutely, this is gonna keep going. And then after that, I couldn't do this alone. It had grown to over 100 women, so I was like, I definitely need help for this. So Shazia joined in. Sonia Jaffer had always been a wonderful part of it. Kristen Hanna were the original sort of Lake Surfistas when we started to really expand. And Shazia came up with the awesome name. We decided to come up with a better name for the group. And Shazia started up the online discussion page, which is there, and as we can see is thriving. And now it is what we see today, and plus more. And then Shazia can elaborate.
Yeah, well, and it's been a really exciting journey. I was lucky to be at that first get together as a participant, and I had literally just started surfing and stand-up paddling that year. So coming out to an event as a new learning person for everything, it was still very welcoming. I did not know what I was doing at all. I got in the waves and I couldn't catch anything. But it was still really fun. And I remember just thinking, wow, this is such a good community. And then when there was the opportunity to join and start organizing, I was super eager to help grow it. I'll never forget that year. It was a tough year for Robin, our biggest year, but also a very magical year when the 4 of us kind of took over the organizing. And then through the years, as Robin said, I saw an opportunity to bring it online as well, so we could reach out to more women. It wasn't just limited to a once a year event, which is a fantastic event, but how do we sustain the community? How do we really bring people together 365 days a year? So building out the online community site, and then Robin's really taken a great lead in building out our kind of official website so that we have that knowledge always out there for people. And what's been super exciting is this is a grassroots community. So when I see on the discussion page, women just getting together, figuring it out themselves, building little pods of surfers, that we are not involved with, that's what it's meant to be, right? Like that's where you get so excited. I saw, you know, it was earlier, I think it was probably in 2019 in the fall, I saw a couple of the women, like I think Marie and a couple of them were just like, we're this little group and we go surfing together now. And I'm like, that's awesome. Like we didn't do that. That's perfect. So seeing the online community thrive and also trying to get more and more participation outside of Toronto and be a little less Toronto centric on the community. You know, we have some US women that are pretty vocal on the site, Sarah and Bonnie and a few of them, but we'd love more, right? Like the Lake Surfistas doesn't just have to be about Toronto or Lake Ontario. We don't know of any other women-focused Great Lake surf groups. So we want the women that are on Lake Superior, we want the women on Lake Michigan to feel like they can be a really key part of it. So it's been exciting to see that as well.
You're expanding to all 5 Great Lakes, and now you're on the ocean though, Shazia. You're on the East Coast now. You just moved, right?
Yeah. And it's not a permanent move. We're back and forth, so I still will be in Toronto. So I'm still going to be a Great Lake surfer. But it's amazing how many Great Lake surfers are out here too. So a number of our surfistas are actually out here now.
Oh, really? Yeah, I know Ali Ambler's
so
moving
Ali,
too.
who many of you know, she's already here.
Nadia too.
So hopefully
Nadia's heading out there.
Yeah. So Ali's out already. I think we're going to get together hopefully this weekend. Krista, she runs Pink Grasshopper Studios. She's an artist. Her partner Alex Kopp runs Quiver Sustainability. So they're out here, and Alex is actually building our board quiver shed for us.
Oh, amazing!
And then Nadia, you're right. Nadia's coming out here, and she's actually gonna be living in our house. So she and Paul are coming out, and they're gonna actually take over the house for the winter. So, yeah.
It like truly is a community, right? You're like, so all of these people, all these connections are through Lake Surfistas, and so you can even move to a different province or different coast and still have this community and these connections and these friendships.
It's funny because like Nova Scotia feels it feels so far away, I guess, but like when you get there and you see the surf community, there's a lot of there's a lot of people from the Great Lakes, and there's already such a migration of people from Ontario going out there that like it just seems like the most natural next step to go if you're craving the waves and you live in Canada and you're on the Great Lakes and kind of thing. So like there's also a whole bunch of other guys that have surfed the Great Lakes back in like the 90s that live out there now, and that's where they call home. So it's like it's all connected, as you say. Like I remember standing like last time I was there, I was looking at Tea House, just kind of looking out, and then some guy started like chatting with me about the waves, what do you think, and the whole bit. And then he asked me if I knew like this guy, and I'm like, yeah, I know that guy. So it's just kind of random how anywhere you go, like someone knows somebody who surfs that like there's always like this weird like 2-level connection of like, oh yeah, I know that guy kind of thing. It's interesting.
It's like everyone knows everyone. I mean, yeah, that big day on Erie on last Sunday, I was like, all the Toronto people showed up, and I was like, oh, I know. Oh, hey, you, I haven't seen you in like a year. You're like, oh, it's everybody. Oh, it is literally the Scarborough Bluffs crowd is just here. And I mean, it's really crazy and everyone knows everyone. Like just saying names now, everyone's, oh yeah, Nadia. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's awesome. And when did you guys figure out that you could surf the lakes? Like, how did that realization occur? Did you always know, or?
I found out a long time ago. It was like 2004 or something like that. Like it was right after I graduated university, and I was like, you know what? I had surfed for the first time in what was it, year 2000 or 2001 in Hawaii. And I had always been like, but even before that, I was like super interested in surf because like Baywatch was kind of like a thing that I watched.
Blue Crush.
I had a huge crush, still have a huge crush on Kelly Slater. Like that's been like, a 25-year long, like.
He's just such a nice guy too.
Such a nice guy, right? So then when we surfed in Hawaii, I loved it. It was very difficult. So I wouldn't say I surfed in Hawaii, like I got pushed into waves in Hawaii. And then I found out you could surf in Canada, and finding out that I could surf in Canada was a huge, like, mind-blowing experience. And then when I was deciding that, you know what, I'm going to take a trip out to Tofino, I have a friend that lives in Vancouver, and she said, well, you know, we'll go. And it was like an actual first planned surf trip. And this friend of mine was actually a friend from elementary school. While researching like wetsuits and everything, I found out people surfed on the Great Lakes. And like, this was before the days of social media and any, like, this was the internet in 2004. And it was like a huge, like, what? And there was this small forum called Origin Surf. And a lot of the original guys, like, today are, you know, are on like the Toronto Surf Club page, like Bob and Andy and a bunch of the Wildwood guys. And it was an awfully terribly bullying type of environment for, you know, there was a lot of testosterone on there. And the funny thing is that I am friends with these guys today, but they gave me a lot of shit.
And like what? Like, what were they like?
Like, it was a lot of that, you know, machismo kind of localism of like, oh, you can't surf the lakes. And when you're like, and you know, when you're agreeing to this and you don't know anything about it, but you want to do it, like you want to know everything about it. But someone's telling you you can't know shit, you're just like, no, what the fuck? So, yeah, I just kind of forged on and said, well, you know, I'm not going to listen to these guys. I've been hanging out on the lake, not knowing you can surf my whole life, but whatever, like, it's my lake too. Eventually, you know, I found out a lot of, you know, a lot of things like the Great Lakes Surf Book, and I had met Mike Sandusky on the beach once, and I was like, oh, look, another surfer. And that's how I kind of met Mike. And it just kind of organically grew from there. And now it's like 15 years accumulation of Great Lakes knowledge of people who have surfed back then, who still surf, you know, have come and gone throughout the years, all the breaks and like wind and everything. It literally overtook my life. I don't remember what the fuck I did before I was surfing. Actually, I do know, but like, it's, I was a musician, like music was back, like I was in a lot of bands before that. And after that, I was like, I'm just going to surf now.
You're like throwing your drumsticks away.
Yeah.
Give me my surfboard. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, so it's like most of my adult life has been chasing waves and being so curious and fascinated with the lakes and how it moves in different, you know, under different conditions, and seeing it flat and seeing it gale force and absorbing that knowledge about the big bodies of water around us is, you know, it almost changes the way you think, that there's effects bigger than all of us, and we need to take care of it.
Yeah,
it is really amazing. Like, you see on a totally flat day, and then you're like, 2 days ago it was this massive storm with these 7-foot waves, and it's like incredible. Yeah, and it's like, if you're not a surfer, you just don't pay attention to that stuff.
Yeah, and before any of us were probably surfers, none of us probably really paid attention to it.
Yeah, people are like, where are you going with that surfboard?
Right.
Like, I'm surfing. Where? On the lake. You didn't see all the waves out there? Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's often the question of like, oh, wait, you mean windsurfing, right? And then you're like, no, for real surfing. Oh, no, like you're going to get towed behind a boat. No, for real surfing.
That's me. What about you, Shazia? When did you find out that, okay, I can surf? I think you learned to surf on the lake.
For me, it's interesting. Robin and I, well, yes and no. So Robin and I have very different and complementary histories, I think, which is really cool. Like, when we think about coordinating for Lake Surfistas, we bring like two sides of the coin, which is super fun. So I didn't surf most of my life. And I only started, really, I would say like 2014 was the first year I really attempted surfing. So that was the year I turned 40. I was going through a massive life change. I was getting divorced. Everything was kind of chaos around me. And I had tried surfing once in 2012. Like Robin said, you get pushed into a wave when I was in Nicaragua, and that was it. And then I kind of never did it again. And I liked it, but I didn't realize it would be a passion. And in 2014, I ended up going to a surf camp in Nicaragua for a week because I loved Nicaragua. It's part of my heart. And so I went back and went to a surf camp for a week. And that's when I truly fell in love with surfing. So I was like, oh, wow, like I love this. Then I came back from that trip and my whole life blew up, basically. And so over the course of the summer, I found solace in the lake, which again was not something that I'd really explored. And it was because I started stand-up paddleboarding. So a friend of mine had let me try her board, and on um, Boxing Day 2013, I drove in a snowstorm to Surf Ontario. That was the year of the big power outage. Like, it was the massive storm. I drove to Surf Ontario on Boxing Day for the sale, and maybe even from you, Robin, I don't know, bought
Probably.
my first stand-up paddleboard. And it sat in my basement, for the winter, because I didn't realize I could go out on the lake. And so that summer of 2014 was the first time I really started paddling on the lake. And I spent like almost every day stand-up paddleboarding, and at the same time had moved closer to the lake. So I lived just 2 kilometers from Cherry Beach. And so I really found this whole new backyard that I didn't know existed. And so through stand-up paddling, that's how I met Robin and a number of members of the surf community, and went to my first Ladies of the Lakes. And it wasn't really until then that I had thought about surfing the lakes as being something viable. And I have to say, like, I just embraced it at that point. As much as I learned to surf in Nicaragua, I became a surfer on the lakes. And they're two very different things. Like, going to a surf camp is very different than getting skunked, learning how to forecast, going out on a day and catching 0 waves because you suck. And those are rites of passage that you'll never get on surf vacations, because you're not in your home territory. You just can't go at the drop of a hat. So I would say, surfing became my passion in Nicaragua, and becoming a surfer happened in Canada. And it's really the lakes that have made me become a surfer. I still have a passion to travel and surf everywhere. I've surfed all around the world. Obviously, with COVID, that changed a ton. I did a massive surf trip in New Zealand last year. Nicaragua is always a place I'm going to go back to constantly once I can again. And that's part of why coming out to Nova Scotia was so important, because I still love the ocean too. So I'm a Great Lakes surfer at heart, but I also love those ocean waves. And I don't think I could pick, which is why I think I'm going to live between the two places for a very long time. And it's amazing. And I first learned how to stand up paddle surf. That was my first foray into surfing. And then since then went further into regular surfing, as you would say. And now I feel like I'm really lucky that I can do both. Like, I still generally just grab my regular surfboard on most days, but then there's those days I go stand up paddle surf, and it still feels like home. Like, that still, brings me back to how I learned, and the feeling of dropping into a wave standing up is so different than dropping into a wave and popping up. And it's nice to be able to do both.
That's how I feel too. It's like that opposite with the complementary. It's like I learned how to surf surfing, and then I picked up SUP surfing, and then but going back onto a surfboard once in a while just feels like home. It's like, oh yeah, I remember this. This is great.
One of my most favorite memories from literally 10 minutes down the road here is Robin and I surfing Martinique a couple of years ago. And she took my surfboard and was like, oh yeah, like, I'm going to surf for a bit. And we had some super fun pictures of you surfing on the Grumpy Bob board out here. So a lake surfboard out in Martinique. It's super fun. We had some really fun, great days.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah, so you're reverse engineering your roles. You're like, I'm going to try my surfer. I'm going to go back on my SUP. It's like nostalgia.
Yeah, it's a nostalgia thing. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, stand-up paddleboarding looks fun. It looks like you can catch more waves because, well, maybe someone wants to describe the difference between lake waves and ocean waves, maybe Robin, because, it is very different. And like you said, Shaz, it's like when you go on the ocean, I mean, I've done a couple surf vacations and I'm like, oh, okay, a surf camp at the end of the week, you're progressing to a certain extent. And then I come back here, and I think it took me 6 months to get back to the level of Brazil when I left, So I'm like, now I can stand up and go down the line. Like, I was doing that in Brazil, but it took me, because you might catch one wave a session just to have it.
So the biggest difference is obviously the volume of water itself. Ocean versus lake is, clear. Funnily enough, the properties are obviously salt water versus fresh water, and chemistry I don't want to get too much into like physics or anything, but like the buoyancy of fresh water is less dense than, is that right? Less dense than salt water. So you sink more on fresh water, which means you need higher volume boards to stay afloat. The intervals between the waves are a lot shorter than in the ocean by way of the fact that it's a smaller body of water. We are completely wind swell versus tides and wind and bathymetry. Obviously we need that, but we are completely dependent on wind. And so like when you're on, the difference between the surf is that I find that once you're surfing on the lakes for a long time and then you go into the ocean, that first session back in the ocean, you're like, I got this, because I can paddle like a monster. I'm way outside now, like really outside. You're like, oh, I'm fucking way too outside here, because like you've been paddling in the lakes. Now, on the reverse side of that, the funny thing is that I went surfing with a friend of mine last Sunday, Timmy Matthews, and he spent the last 5 or 6 months, like during lockdown in Hawaii, because that's where he's from. So him and his newborn son and his wife have been in Hawaii for the longest time, and then finally came back because his wife Kat is from here. So they're back, and he's like, yo, let's go surf. And I was like, all right, let's go. He hadn't been on the lakes in ages. So we went out and he got destroyed. This was that Sunday where it was kind of dumb. And he took out his brand new custom like longboard built in Hawaii while he was there and at the factory he used to work at or something. And he was like somewhere in the middle. He's looking at me and he's all tired and he's on his board and he's like, yo, tow me. And I'm like, and I'm already still struggling. So, on the drive back, he was just like, holy fucking shit. I haven't been like killed like that in a while. And I was like, guy, honestly, the worst session that you can have, that any surfer can have, is the first session transition back from ocean to lake. That session each time is gonna suck. And you have to like keep going a couple more times before it starts feeling right again.
Like I remember being in Brazil and there was a storm. It was a really windy day, and so no one was surfing because they're like, oh, the conditions are crap. And I looked at the water. I'm like, it looks like the lakes. I felt this like warmth in my heart. I'm like, because it's all choppy and windy. Like,
so that's the pro tip. That's the pro tip for when you're on surf vacations and you're in spots that are crowded. You go out when it's on shore because you know how to surf it. Yeah. And so I've done it in Colombia, in El Salvador. Like there's this one spot I was surfing in El Salvador, and any given day there were 60 to 70 people on a tiny point. So it sucks, right? Like you can never get a wave. Like I'm not competitive. I'm not going to like fight for those waves. So I would just go out at like midday. They were like, oh, no one surfs cancer hour because, it's an onshore wind and it's too hot. I'm like, dude, I'm the only person on this break. I'm going. And honestly, like comparatively, I was like, these are still great waves. Like it's a little windy, but like who cares? There's still, a 10 to 15 second wave period, still salt water. I'm still in a bathing suit. Like I can go surf the onshore wind. I'll be fine.
Because that's the other thing too, is like you're adding another at least 10 pounds with a soaking wet wetsuit when you're surfing the lakes, especially the thick wetsuits, the 5.4s or the 6.5s.
Yeah, your mobility goes down a lot. And like, with lake surfing, you become less of a wave diva. Like you see it when it's shitty outside, like an ocean shitty, you're like, no, it's fine. And then the ocean surfers who know nothing about lakes, they're like, I don't want to surf here. But I remember this one session I went out, and it was in Malibu Point in California last year, I think. And I was SUP surfing it. It was a tiny day, but the winds this week were just like howling. I think it was the Santa Ana winds, and they were like just really strong that particular season. Climate change is what everyone was saying. So I was out, and it was a little bit windy, and I was a little annoyed that I had traveled all this far to surf wind swell in the ocean, but you go out anyways. And all the locals were like, how the fuck are you even standing on that board? Like I'd be blown out. And I'm like, oh, you don't even know the half of it. Like
you're like, I got 10 seconds to catch a wave. You
understand this luxury. I got forever. Check my hair. Oh, here it is.
Like I'm used to like getting it organized and going, and then like every second
going. So yeah, it's funny how like surfers and then, or like lake surfers versus ocean surfers, when they meet in the ocean, they're like, you surf where? What? No.
Yeah.
Nuh-uh.
Yeah.
It's a-
Yeah,
Canada,
totally. They don't,
cold.
Yeah, exactly. Freeze. Yeah, like just to be in a bathing suit. Like I don't even care what the conditions are like. I'll just get out there just to like feel what it's like to have skin against the water. You know?
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. We've been really lucky this summer that the water, I mean, it's climate change, so it's not great, but that
Yeah.
we've been able to have such a warm summer on the lakes. Robin and I were out in Sandbanks a couple of weeks ago and had like the best surf day. I got such a sunburn, but
Yeah,
we
me
surfed
too.
for like 6 hours, 8 hours. I don't even know what it was. It would be like go surf for 2 hours, come back in, grab a drink, grab some food, go back out for 2 hours. And it was such a good crew too, like the vibe that day, because it was just all people we knew surfing. Like it was about what, 6 of us or so.
Yeah.
And it was just everyone, mainly women, one guy, token guy, Edgar was out, but
Fucking
like,
guy.
such a fun day.
Yeah.
The water was so clear, like that crystal clear, summery, refreshing feel that you don't get in the ocean. It's such a lake feel. I love it. Like I live for days like that.
Yeah, it's so. I mean, so yeah, that Erie day.
No algae. How was
Like
the algae in Erie that day? Like how was it? I haven't been down.
the algae.
Yeah.
You end up with some in your hair. It wasn't that bad because I feel like a lot of it just got pushed. It was a really big day, so bigger than I probably should have been out in. But I was paddling around, and it was like a big community of people because it was a Sunday, so all the Toronto people were there. So again, it was that like, oh hey, or you, oh. And then it was just like these beautiful waves. Like they were really like these kind of stormy, like looks like you're out to sea, like Moby Dick kind of level of like no one would be out in this. And then all of a sudden the clouds part and this crazy rainbow. And Dave Johnson took a picture of it, but I don't.
I saw
yeah,
it. It's so nice.
but it was like I mean, you can't do it justice with the camera. I'm like, oh, I should take a picture. But I'm like, nah, I don't want to get out. And also, like, it's not going to look the way it looks in real life. It was like I've never seen a rainbow in a perfect arch, like opaque. You couldn't see through the colors. And
wow.
this is like lighting up the sky. You can barely look at it because you're busy dealing with what's coming. And I'm just like, this is perfect. It's like you're moving your body. You're receiving the gifts of nature. There's people out, and I'm like, this is perfect. This is heaven. You know, this is what life is about. You know, and I'm like, it's so healing.
It's interesting how you forget about everything else. Like this is one of the things for me for surfing is I've played sports my whole life, and I've played a lot of competitive sports. And surfing is the only sport that I've never decided to like try and compete at in a way that would make me not love it. So when I think about, a lot of people just run because they like running. Well, I got so competitive in running that eventually I didn't want to run anymore, or mountain bike racing, or whatever that sport is. And even stand-up paddling, I love stand-up paddling, but I got so competitive stand-up paddle racing that I kind of was like, no, I'm not into this anymore. And so it's funny, like I have a friend who's very type A, and he keeps saying like, why aren't you doing drills and going out and doing like really dedicated surf training? And I'm like, I don't want to not love it. I want to just get in the water, and I would rather be a mediocre surfer getting my ass handed to me on the regular by the waves than spend 1,000 hours of training and come out the other side and hate surfing because it was a chore. And so it's been a very interesting and deliberate choice to actually not try and be a great surfer, if that makes any sense. To say like, I'm not going to force myself.
She's a good surfer.
Aww. But no, I'm a mediocre surfer, which is totally fine. I would rather be a mediocre surfer or even a crap surfer, enjoying every second out there, than be some kick-ass surfer that everyone's like, oh wow, look at that person. It's just not worth it. And especially during the pandemic, it's been such a solace. I forget what's happening in the world when I'm out there. And Talia, you were there one of the first surfs pre-lockdown, or the last surf, I guess, pre-lockdown. That day we were out at the Bluffs, and it was such a beautiful day. They were tiny waves, but they were so joyous. Yeah, you were there too, Robin. It was all three of us.
It was like a whole other, whole other world.
That's a whole lifetime ago. But it was Yeah, the last surf before lockdown, and
That
it
was a
was
fun
a
day.
joyous, warm day of fun waves and just laughter. And you could look back on the beach
Tiny.
and forget. Like I think I said to you after, this is the first time I forgot about what's happening around us.
I remember
And
that.
I had a couple small surfs, away from people in the meantime. And the same thing was like, you forget, like when you're in the water, you're focused on being safe. So that takes a significant portion of your attention. But B, there's nothing like that feeling. And there have been a lot of articles written about, more so focused on salt water, but I think it still applies to fresh water, about the energy of water moving around you and what that does to your body and how that
Mhm.
relieves stress and how it's this energy that moves. And I think it's completely true. Like you feel so different.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
really is, like, you can't really think about anything else. Like, I was making fun of kite surfers with Steve the other day. And we were like, I mean, once you get it, I mean, I'm sure there's a tough learning curve. I know there's a tough learning curve, but once you get it, you're kind of like there and it's kind of boring. And I was like, yeah, it's like you have all this time to like have fights in your head or like, kind of ruminate and
Yeah, you can't
stew,
do that with surfing.
No, no.
but not with surfing. No,
I,
exactly.
I've had fights in my
no,
head surfing though.
I
I have had fights in my head surfing. Like, but sometimes it's like that's where I go and work it out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, okay,
yeah.
I've resolved now. Like, oh, here's the wave. We're good now. So,
I only have fights in my head surfing when it's on the ocean because I have so much time.
You're waiting for like 10 minutes for the next
Yeah,
set to come in and you're like,
exactly. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Tyler.
Kite surfers, that's an interesting one. I got hit by a kite surfer while surfing, which was terrifying. It was at Coburg. You weren't there that day, Robin, but I was on my stand-up paddleboard and I took a wave. So I was carving toward the pier to then come back. And as I turned back, I saw this kiter coming like straight at me and at the pier. So he had no business being there to start with.
no
And so I started
business.
yelling and I'm like yelling like, hey, hey. And he wasn't even looking. So eventually, like he was so close, I just jumped off my board and like, cannonballed down as far deep as I could get.
Oh,
And I come back up and he's in the water, his stuff's everywhere. I look at my board
ah.
and the fin from his kite had cut almost half a foot into my board
Oh
and was
yeah, I
stuck
remember you
in my
told
board.
this. Fuck that.
So if I hadn't jumped, that would have been my leg or something. And his reaction was, "Oh well, yeah, boards get damaged." And then he's like, "Whatever." I'm like,
It is
and
what
I
it
like was
is.
trying not to cry,
Oh.
and I was trying not to cry, and eventually he just like took off or whatever, and I'm like, my board's ruined. Luckily, I had a surfboard in the car, so I went and got my surfboard and like just went into the lineup, and I was bitching like loudly at that point. So I went from, I don't know about you guys, but when I'm mad, my first emotion is tears. Like when I'm mad and frustrated, and so I'm like, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, even though it's not because I'm sad, I'm just really pissed off. And so then by the time he'd moved on and gone wherever he was going, then I got really mad. And so by the time I was back in the water, I was beyond the teary phase and in the like, I want to tear something down phase. So I was bitching. And I think one of his friends was in the lineup and went out and was like, you got to make this right. So eventually he came back out into the water and like handed me $80. The board cost a lot more than that to repair, but it was a
Yeah.
gesture.
$80. Come on. Like that's a cop out. Like here you go. Like throwing you the
Yeah.
money so the liability is gone. Come
You should
on.
have been like, here's my kiteboard and kite. See what you can get if you sell it. I'd be so scared that when I came up, the kite would be over me, like,
Oh,
Yeah.
like, oh man.
At
That,
eBay, they're bad
Honestly,
too
it
on
was
a
just
certain days.
instinct, like just get the heck out of the way.
and they have the whole lake, the wind. Yeah. You don't need to be on the shore, like where the waves are breaking.
No.
You can be anywhere.
Any sport where you have to inflate the sail or the kite and untangle lines and then have somebody like set that for you with like your $3,000 worth of equipment. Nah. Like stand-up paddleboarding is already enough equipment. That's like one paddle. And now like kiting, there was this one time that Ben and I were walking along the beach in Pickering, and it was a windy day, and I wanted to like I wanted to go for a walk and see what the conditions were like. And then this kiter just started talking to us, And he just kept going on about kiting and how he knew all these guys at the surf shops. And I'm like, I know these guys at the surf shops. Like, but he just kept going on and on. And he's like, hey, can you help me, like, you know, launch my kite? So, and Ben's a friendly guy, and he's like, yeah, okay, sure. And so we stood around for like 5 minutes listening to this guy go on and on about kiting and how he's like a dentist or some shit. And then, you know, launched his kite, and I was like,
wait, I've talked to that guy.
oh, and I was like, shut up.
Hopefully he's listening. Yeah.
But like, it was very like, yeah, that A type, and, you know, very guy, and like,
He's explaining to you what you know, like he's telling you about Surf Ontario and surfing.
Yeah, like the guys at Silent Sports. I know this. I'm like, oh yeah, Simon, we're good. We're buddies. We used to smoke pot with an Olympian once. That was another story. That's another story. Anyways, it was like, and you're just like, oh yeah, I know the guy, but like completely dismissed everything. So, and it's also explaining to Ben, and Ben's like super personable about that. And he's like, oh yeah, cool. Yeah. Okay. Get out of here.
Thanks so much for your input. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then off he went kiting, and I was like, goodbye.
Yeah, at least it takes them away. It's like,
yeah, goodbye.
Wherever the wind may take you, literally.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, yeah, and this sort of idea of like the rival, well, sharing the lakes, right, with all of these different sports, because really on a lake, yeah, you can have kites, you can have windsurfers, you have, now I'm seeing those foils.
Yeah.
They're not so common, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm all for sharing for everyone. Like, absolutely, I want everyone to share, but like, if you're going to be on a kiteboard and you have the entire lake, and there's a set of surfers who are like stationary in that sort of general area, don't go there. It's like, and they always do it.
Yeah, same with jet skis.
I was just going to say, yeah, the jet skis breaking up the set that was coming in.
Yeah.
I was like, get out of here.
You're messing up the set, man. Get the fuck out of here.
A-Bay is the worst for that. A-Bay is the worst for the jet skis coming like right into that corner.
Yeah.
And that one boat.
Yeah, because there's
that one boat. Like, oh my God.
It let this one boater loves like coming right in and just sitting there and watching you, and it's so creepy.
Yeah, and then who was it that posted that guy was arrested for kidnapping and sexual assault?
Yeah.
On the boat? No, this guy on a boat.
No, the boat guy.
Oh, that guy's so creepy.
That is really creepy. You're like, so I have a legit need to be concerned about this boat guy just watching us.
Yeah, he's creepy. I've said some words to him to get out of here.
So weird. I mean, it's so interesting. Well, and like just back to the idea of like, I've had it out so many times to lineups in Toronto where it's all guys. And so this idea of like the Lake Surfista community to be like, oh, like you can like coordinate with girls who are going to be out. Cause there's just something about having like a girl there. I don't know what it is, but even on that big day in Erie, I was like sticking with like the other girl that was out, like just like, I don't know what it is. Like she's way better than me, but I'm like, at least I don't know. There's something just familiar with that whole thing. And there's some sense of safety, I guess. I don't know what it is. But something really does feel right about this.
That's totally legit.
Yeah.
It is definitely a safety thing. Like I feel like whenever I go out there and I see someone new, like a new female, then I somehow instantly am always watching out for them, making sure that they're okay. Or, if it's any of you guys, then I'm checking in to see if you're okay. And I know you guys are checking in to see if I'm okay. And like, it's, I mean, I do that with some of the guys, but not like that I know, but usually if it's any of the Lake Surfistas crew or anyone then, in our community, we're like, oh yeah, that person's there. Like, it's a really, I can't explain it, right? Like, and it's everywhere. I've done it in like ocean waves where there's only one other girl there, and then somehow you're talking to that person and talking about where you're from and where you surf and everything, and then there's these like kind words of exchanged between each other. Surfer girls we kind of get it.
Yeah, it's really cool in that way.
And even in the short time I've been surfing, I've noticed how much that's changed on the lineup. I mean, obviously, Robin, for you, it's night and day because back in the day you were often the only woman. But even in the 5 years or so that I've been in the community, there are now days where it's all women. on the break, or
Yeah.
99% women. And
Yeah.
those surfista days are magical. Like there's been a couple of them at A-Day. There's been a couple of them. Well, the last time I was at Huron for quite a while, Steve Graham was the only guy in the water, and it was just all women.
I was
And I was like,
literally,
Steve, like you
on
lucked out.
Wednesday.
You
It
got
was
the
just
best.
Steve. Yeah.
Yeah, the best lineup. And those days, like the one A-Day that jumped out in my mind was like, I think Robin, you were probably there.
Jordana was there.
Anne-Marie was there.
Yeah.
Jordana, Diana, maybe Alejandra, Nadia Bear.
Yeah.
And it was
there
just
was a
like
good
only
handful.
women. And
we were
just
all
like,
kicking ass.
holy...
Like everyone was catching waves, and we were like, "Get out of here, guys!" Like,
yeah,
no.
yeah, it was
break
awesome. It was such a good day, and the vibe is so different. Like the vibe, I just feel like the vibe becomes so encouraging, and like everyone's cheering everybody on, and like you don't care as much if you suck or you bail on a wave and it didn't work out. You're just like, whatever, and everyone's like, whatever, it's awesome, you're great, you're beautiful, and it's just this vibe of just encouragement. And obviously the guys can do that, but it's way less common. Like there's a handful of guys, I think, that love it when we're all out, and they love seeing the women in the lineup, and they will join in to that camaraderie, but I don't know that it's the default if we're not the ones kind of driving it.
Yeah, there is that camaraderie, right? Like it does feel like there's just more encouragement, and there's more like concern for the other people in the group. You're like watching someone take a wave and you're cheering them on, you're like yelling, stand up. Like, whereas, yeah, I feel like when it's a group of guys, you're just kind of, everyone's sort of concerned with their own performance, their own experience. And I don't know, maybe that's just a projection or something, but it's just something I've noticed. It sounds like you guys noticed that too, where
I also noticed that with, in addition to that, like the guys that are out there that may not know what have ever seen you surf, or another woman on the lake surf, I feel like that they're 10 times more surprised watching a woman kick ass out there than watching a guy kick ass out there. And it's kind of, it's almost as if they're like, oh my God, wow, you're really good. And it's like, thank you. But like, you weren't surprised when the guy behind me, like, did a cutback. So
expected that he did if he's still out
here. Yeah, right? So it's kind of like, it's interesting. Like, I still feel super proud when that happens, but it's, it's that one little thing where you kind of notice where you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I know I did good, but I don't know why you're so surprised. Well, you shouldn't be so surprised.
Right. Yeah, you're like, is this just like the Mickey Mouse Award? Like the standards are lower, so I can surpass expectations so much better, even though I'm like on par with the boys, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. There was actually like the example of that was like, I was surfing Coburg, and like a guy that I don't really surf with, he was coming back. He caught a good wave, and then he was paddling back out. And I'm a goofy footer, so I took off on a good wave, and I started going left towards the pier. And I did a really awesome top turn. I was pretty proud of the top turn, and then cut back to another top turn. And like I bailed on that second turn there, but like going left means you're going towards the pier. So, after my maneuver, I started paddling out, and he was like, holy shit, I thought you were going to go like crash directly into the pier. I didn't think you were going to do a cut back out of there. And I was like, I was aiming for the pier for that reason. But like, thank you so much. Like, I was like, thank you. Thanks for noticing that. Like, it was a huge claim for me, but then it was also like, I don't know, like,
but more importantly, like, how's my hair?
Yeah, how do I look? Like, I just feel like he may have not said that to like any of the guys who were surfing.
Right.
Like that standard's a little different.
Right. Yeah. There is that thing, right? Like, yeah. And it's such a long learning curve, surfing. Like, I've been at it for 2 years, and it's still like,
it's hard. No, it took me years to really get like confidence. It took me years to learn how to turn. Yeah. Sorry, Shazia, go ahead.
It's one of those things. No. It plays with your emotions a bit, right? Like, just when you think you've got it and you're like, oh, wow, I'm really progressing, then you'll plateau, or you'll like slide back, and like things that you thought you could do, you can't do anymore all of a sudden. So for me, it's definitely like surfing is like riding a wave, literally, because you feel like you're on this awesome progression and you've got something like sorted. And then all of a sudden you're like, what's wrong with me? Like, did I forget how to surf? Like, I don't even know how to do this anymore. Whether it be the conditions or how you're feeling that day or anything, it's definitely an emotional progression.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so much has to come together that even just trying something new, like usually with learning a physical activity, you're like trying to see the limits of like, where do I put my balance, or what maneuvers can I get away with and still stay on the board, or like, what does it feel like to do this? Like I can watch Robin do something, but what does it feel like when in my body when I'm trying to do the same thing? And then you get this, but it's rare that you're going to get a wave that sets you up to be able to try those things. And then when you mess up, which you will because you're learning, you're not going to get the same kind of wave. So what you need to do is different. It's like a very difficult sport because the conditions are changing. But on a snowboard, you're like, the hill's the same. Like I'm going to learn how to turn in a week, you know, like easily. But with surfing, you're like, yeah, it could take a decade to learn how to turn or go down the line.
It took a long time. And with the lakes, it's even more difficult, like you said, because it's so inconsistent. I guess like with a solid week of surfing on the ocean and like perfect waves every day, like no variation. Yeah, you can learn how to turn in a week. Yeah. But, you know, it just doesn't happen here. And but it does make you a better like ocean surfer. Mm-hmm. But you got to just keep going on. Like that drive will be there, and you may be a mediocre surfer for the rest of your life, but when you're out there, it feels like $1 million bucks. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like what you were saying, Shazia. Like it's fun. That's, I think what's beautiful about surfing is it's fun no matter what stage you're at. Like it doesn't really ever get boring. Maybe for long plateaus, you're kind of like, ugh. But you know, when you're just learning how to stand up on a 10-foot board in the whitewater, that's fun. When you're starting to turn on the line, that's fun. Like it's always fun. There's always something more you can learn. Like there's never an end point where you're like, oh, okay. Like with skiing, you're like, what's the next level of skiing? I'm gonna launch myself off these massive jumps now. Like, no, I'm good. I can turn on the hill, and that's about it. But with surfing, there's always more that you're like, maybe I'll never be able to do a cutback or like get inside a massive barrel. But it'll be fun.
I've never been barreled.
No.
To this day, I have never been barreled. Like I've had the tiniest bit of like lake cover on a like, yeah, but never been truly barreled like in the ocean. No, it's still that elusive thing for me.
Yeah, you're like, this is the next one, barrel chasing.
Yeah. Same. I've gotten close in Nicaragua this past Christmas. I got so close, and there's a video of it and a picture, and I'm like, it's like right behind me. I was just slightly too fast. But part of it was New Year's Day, and we'd stayed up till like 3 a.m. having a bonfire, and I got up at 5 to surf. So I think I was still drunk. So I took bigger risks, which is probably I do not advocate this for anybody that's listening. And so I was just paddling, like I was just going, and you look at the wave, and it was a fast wave. Like I'm just like rocketed through it, and it was just like right behind me. And then I tried this other spot in Nicaragua called the Boom, which is like a super shallow, it's like 2 feet of water barrel. And I've managed to like get onto waves there, but not get through the barrel. But it's a scary wave.
It's like a whole bunch of things needs to work out for that to happen, right? And then my friend in Costa Rica, he's like, oh, my head hurts. I'm like, why? What happened? He's like, I just like barrel hit me on the head. He's like, yeah, if you don't tuck under, like you're just bombarded with like 20 pounds of water hitting you. Yeah.
I've seen enough Kook of the Day videos, like of just like, you know, somebody getting a lip to the forehead, and you're like, oh.
Yeah, it's like, just like, and it's a heavier wave. Yeah, usually shallower water. And
reefy. It's terrifying.
Usually
reef terrifies me.
Me too. Yeah, I watched Blue Crush last night. I was just in the mood, and I was like, like that's just such a great. I was like I think I watched it. It came out in 2002. I remember watching it before I knew you could. I had no idea that there was anything resembling surfing anywhere that I lived. And so I was just a snowboarder at the time, and I remember just being like, oh wow, sound like, you know, because it's all the drama of like, you know, at the shallow reef and getting your head cracked and getting your leash caught around the corals, and like how heavy the wave is and all that stuff, and how like one wipeout can ruin your life forever, and that, you know,
it can
totally
one wipeout can ruin your life forever.
Mm-hmm. What's your worst wipeout? Like, do you have a story?
Oh, you go, Robin.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
The scar on my face from Costa Rica. I don't know if you could see it, but it's large. Most people don't notice it until I'm like, here it is. I was surfing, it was 2012, and I was surfing Costa Rica with Sonia. Her and I went on a surf trip together. It was a leap year. I remember that. It was like March 1st or 2nd, and it was literally our last day in Nasara. And this is back when I was surfing. So I was actually surfing on a shortboard this whole week and progressing and doing great. And I had a great time. It was like my first time ever in Costa Rica. And I remember like paddling out, and it wasn't a big day. Like it was like maybe a 3-foot wave. And at that point I was in probably the most physically fit I'd ever been in my life. Super strong, super confident. And I had been surfing for like 10 days. I paddled out, caught a wave, purled, didn't make the wave, which was fine. But when I was under the water, I felt a giant like blow to my face. And I don't know if it was my board, if it was another surfer. To this day, I have no idea who hit me or what hit me. But I felt the giant blow underwater. I remember thinking to myself, this is going to leave a bruise. And then when I came up for air, I felt my entire face flapping off my face, like, and blood, a lot of blood. And then I turned around and I was like held down by like another by the rest of the set. So another like 3-wave hold down, came back up.
3 waves holding you under before you
came up
for air. Oh, okay. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Came up and like, I was just like right in the impact zone. I got my board, I went on my board, and I held onto my face like this and paddled back to shore, waiting for the white water to take me in. And then I suddenly finally in shallow waters, and I see this guy Baywatch sprinting towards me, like totally in shock. And I was like, oh my God, what's happening? And this guy, while he's running, takes off his shirt. This guy's like 6'3", and find out he's like the pastor of the town. And he takes off his rash guard and just starts squeezing my head, like really firmly. And I'm so in shock, like I just kind of stare at him, reaches down my leg, unleashes my board, like hand tosses it on the beach and starts walking me. And he says calmly, "You are cut very badly. I've got you. I'm going to take you to the hospital now." And I'm like, oh, okay. So now I'm in a parking lot. He throws me in the back of a motorcycle, starts yelling in Spanish. I don't know what the hell's going on. I've got no flip-flops. I'm straight out of the ocean and I'm bleeding profusely. And off I go. Off I go to a clinic that's like 2 kilometers away. At that time, Sonia didn't know I was gone. Nobody knew that I was surfing within that group, knew that I had left, because it was just such a fast thing. And a few minutes later, Teo, the guy who saved me, he was now at the clinic. He drove there and he's on the phone. He gets off the phone. He's like, "I just spoke to my friend. He's the surgeon here. He's going to come and he's going to come take care of you. He's on his way." So he takes me into the room, into like, I guess in the clinic. And he continues to just start like put pressure on my hip, on my face. And he's not stopped. He's just there and he's holding my head. And I was like, I have to tell my friends. They have no idea that I'm here. I'm pretty sure Sonia is like freaking out. So the other half of that is Sonia was freaking out. After about half an hour, she had no idea where I was. She was looking for me and she couldn't see me out in the lineup. She came onto shore, saw my board and my flip-flops just on the beach, and was like, something's not right. She goes and talks to like somebody. Hey, she grabbed my board and she's like, has anyone seen, the person? Has anyone seen her? And literally there were 2 Asians on that beach that week. It was her and me. So some guy was like, there was a girl, she was Asian. She just took off and she was really hurt. So she's freaking the fuck out. And she starts running with 2 boards to find me. And she has no idea where I went. And she finds it. She's literally, there's like a roadside clinic, and she pops in and finds me there. At that point, I was already under a lot of morphine. And the doctor had come in, assessed me, cleaned me out. He said, "You're very lucky if it went through your face," which was almost the case. He's like, "You've got about 2 more millimeters and it would have been through my face, I would have had to airlift you to like Santa Teresa, and I'd be screwed. Like I'd be there under surgery. So he, he cleaned me up. He sewed me back up, 26 stitches on my right along here and on my brow. I was a goddamn mess. Like I was an absolute mess. Gave me a prescription of, antibiotics and everything. And like, I just remember the community that was there, like all the surfers that were there were so supportive and so concerned. And like word got out that this girl got out, she got cut, and it was a story. It was like the talk of the town, apparently, that, I had sustained these injuries. The doctor cleared me to fly the next day, and Sonia basically shoved all my shit in like a bag, like, cause I was so like, I was still under morphine. It was not in a good place at all. Like I felt like shit. Like you can imagine what that was like.
All swollen, like in pain.
Swollen and in pain coming off morphine. And I remember this one story, this one thing that happened. So we were on the taxi back to Liberia, and we were going to stay in town for a night before the flight back at like 7 a.m. So this happened at around 10 a.m. the day before, so less than 24 hours. Then we had to leave that evening to go, to start catching our plane. So we get there, and at that point I was already coming off morphine and felt super sick. And I remember telling Sonia, like, because I was lying down the whole time, I was like, pull over, I need to throw up. So he pulls over, and this is dry season, and she's holding my hair. I'm hurling because I'm coming off morphine, and the pressure from having thrown up so much already was like causing blood to come down my sunglasses. So like I'm still bleeding, I'm throwing up, and then I look up because it's dry season, there's a fucking bushfire like right over and like,
just like I'm in literal hell.
And I think at that point I laughed. Like I was like, this is now ingrained, this is burned into my brain for the rest of my life. I'm going to tell this story to everyone I can tell this story to. And like, I think I laughed in my heart, like, fuck off, really? Come on.
Yeah, you're like, my face is split in half. I'm vomiting. I'm withdrawing from opiates, and the world's on fire.
Yeah. And like, the surf was really fucking good though. That surf was so good though. Yeah. And it was a 3 or 4 month recovery back. I ended up getting a really bad infection when I came home. I was also going through, the breakup of my marriage at that time when that happened. So it was like a lot. A lot went on. And that accident, that wipeout changed my life. And it's why I SUP surf today, because I lost a lot of confidence in surfing. Like that motion of on your face just kind of like, I ended up getting this weird like PTSD every time, like, going into a wave. And I'd already been supping at that time. So Nadia Bear was like, and Nadia Bear also has a laceration to her face that she had. And that's how we started becoming friends. Cause she's like in solidarity. It happened to her once in California. And she's like, you know what? I started SUP surfing. And I was like, okay. So yeah. And that's how I started SUP surfing. Cause like, Nadia had experienced something similar, and it helped her out, and she didn't want to quit, and I didn't want to quit.
It feels like you're not face first, so
no you're like kind of shoulder first.
Totally. It's like there's more like control of your head, more protection.
You should try it, Talia.
You should try it.
I should. It's like,
it's super fun.
I know, so like you look like little waves, and you're like, there's a wave you definitely can't paddle to get, but even if the wave dies, you just keep paddling.
You just kind of go for it.
It's also, there's just something so much fun about being already standing when you're dropping in. Like, unless you have the fastest pop up in the face of the earth, you can never pop up as fast as being already up when you're paddling into the wave. And it's really a cool feeling to just get from the entire second that wave is starting right through, and so dropping in is just super fun. Like there's nothing better than a stand-up paddle drop in my opinion.
It's kind of like snowboard drop into the half pipe. Like you're already just like, boom.
It's
that's
super fun. It's super fun.
It's also
cool.
like a mental thing too, because like a 3-foot wave when you're lying down in your face looks huge sometimes. I guess it depends on your mindset.
Yeah.
Like for me it was. And then when you're standing up, that same wave doesn't seem as intimidating because you see it from a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And that really helped me mentally, like get over that, like, oh my God, the wave is so big block that I was having. Because I can now see it like, oh, it's okay. It's not that big.
Yeah, it's interesting too. Like purling is so like nose diving, and like it usually happens because you need to paddle really hard to kind of avoid that, or like maybe you're just in the wrong spot and the wave just like chucks you. But so that, yeah, if you have this psychological PTSD around it, it's like you can't. What you need to overcome that happening is what is actually being blocked by the fear. So it's this like catch where you're like, I just really can't do this anymore because I psych myself out and then I'm gonna nosedive. And yeah, so that's tricky. True. It's hard. Like I know my friend's partner is Costa Rican. He's a surf instructor. He had a near drowning experience. I think he was unconscious for like 15 minutes in the water, was found airlifted to San Jose in Costa Rica. And he was in a coma for a while and is like back surfing. I'm like, I don't know how, like his process and overcoming that, like after that experience, you know, like.
Have you seen the movie Soul Surfer, or like the Bethany Hamilton story?
I saw her documentary.
You should watch it.
Okay. Yeah.
Soul Surfer is great too.
It's a beautiful. It's like the cinematic version of it rather than the official like documentary. But yeah, like that mental thing of getting over that. And I think the best way to describe it is because the water and the waves are so powerful that there's no way that you can quit. Like if it has drawn you that much, then like you're gonna, even if you may not surf again, you'll still find inspiration and like comfort in it.
It's also like a metaphor for everything. Like even John Kabat-Zinn, like meditation people are like, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf, right? It's like this idea of just responding to changing conditions and like dealing with stuff. And then even me, so I'm like, where my blocks are in surfing, I'm like, yeah, when do I ever just like paddle really hard and just like charge it in life? Like so many times I don't do that. And so you're like watching your personality defects emerge in the water. I'm like, yeah, I'm impatient. I'm like kind of hold back a bit at critical moments. Like, but I'm also resilient and don't give up. So I'm like, so you get to see how your like psyche is showing up when you're surfing.
It's such a mental game. It's such a mental game, surfing, and like when to let go, when to push through. Like those are the things I always struggle with. And for me, that happens more so in the ocean for some reason than the lakes. I don't know why. In the lakes, I feel like I'm kinder to myself and kind of just don't worry about it. But in the ocean, that's where I feel my mental blocks the most and where I feel my fears, like getting into bigger waves. Like I've only done a couple, significantly for me, big waves. But, I get that like paralyzing fear where I won't even paddle. And, if it's like overhead or more, I'll like start to go. And then I know that my last 2 paddle strokes weren't really there because I didn't really want to go. I'm like, oh, well, I didn't get it. That's okay. But like, I could have got it. But like subconsciously, I'm just scared of, can I make the drop? What happens if I wipe out? Like, and so it's this constant battle of like, where should you push through and where should you back off? And it's an interesting balance.
Yeah, it's like being right at the edge of like your comfort where you're like, I still feel okay. But then anything can happen, right? Like the board to the face is such a common injury and it's serious. And it's like
it could be a 1-foot wave.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hitting a rock, like that kind of stuff is worse than sometimes wiping out on a big wave. I mean, hold downs where the wave has a lot of energy and you're underwater for a long time, really psychologically scary where you're just
that's terrifying.
Those are scary,
But then the actual injury of like your board hits you, or someone else's board hits you, and you're like, it's not even. This could have happened with me just like kicking out after like an amazing run, like this, It's not even anything about like level or progression. And Chaz, I know you have a story about your hood getting caught. Is that your worst wipeout, or what's your, I don't know why we're
like I've been worst story. I'm knocking on wood. Yeah, I'm knocking on wood right now because I haven't had something like Robin's happen. but I've had more like little things happen that kind of add up and they accumulate like little rocks of fear. So I think I've had like 2 that were significant that kind of come to mind. So the one was a very early lake surf story for me. Like it was my first year lake surfing. And Robin, you'll remember when they held the freshest wave at the Cove and Nadia Bear won for women. It
Yes.
was June, like 2015 probably. And I had just started SUP surfing, but I was getting okay at it. And I had the Coraban, the 7-foot Coraban.
Yes.
It was Robin's old board. And so we'd gone to the freshest wave contest at the Cove. I did not compete. I had no business going in there. But then we went to A-Bay after to go surfing. And there was not a lot of people out at A-Bay. Like it was basically me and Nick, and I don't know if 1 or 2 other people were out. And I was out, and he had happened to, or maybe he didn't surf, he was on shore. And I was going for a wave, and I fell. And again, like not a lot of water. Like it wasn't huge. It was messy. But I couldn't touch the bottom, but like it was not far out. And I went under, and as I went under, my board must have moved. So, sorry, it wasn't my board. My board was still behind me. I went under, but I was wearing a detachable hood. Like I didn't have like a full, because it was June. So I think I was wearing like a 3-2, but then a separate hood to keep my head warm. And the force of the water pulled the hood back. So it was choking me. So the back suck on the wave, right, because the wave was still going, was just literally pulling it backwards. And because it was a bit of a bigger day and messy, the waves were constant too.
Oh,
so
Lord.
I kind of had a second, like as soon as I went under, I was like, I got to pick. The only way I'm going to get out of the tension of the hood is to actually go deeper. Because if I try and come up, all the backwash of the waves is just going to keep pulling it. So until I get out of that rotation of the wave, the hood can't move. But I don't have a huge amount of air in my lungs. So if I go deeper, I'm worried about how long it's going to take me to get up. So like in a split second, I kind of had to make that decision. And so I went deeper. I'm like, you know what? Like, I know I can hold my breath. It's scary, but I know I can do it. If I pass out because of lack of blood, I can't do anything about that. So I went deeper, got the hood off, and then came up, and I was obviously exhausted. And so I just like grabbed my board and like just lay on it and let the whitewater push me in. And Nick was on shore, and he said to me, he's like, I was getting ready to figure out how to call 911. Like, you were under a very long time. And that was like my first year of lake surfing. So like the good thing it taught me was that like I can make that decision. I can calm myself down and make the decision, but it was definitely scary. And nothing bad happened. And then again, in split second decision making, like I think that's for me, it's been less accidents and more just how do you make those quick judgment calls. I was surfing in Nicaragua 2 Christmases ago, and I have a really good friend I surf with from California, when we meet there to surf together, and she's an excellent surfer. She's extremely capable. I'll never forget one of the first times I was down there, and when I met her, you know, her and her husband would go off, her husband's a shaper, would go off on all these surf adventures, and we'd be, you know, I was in the beginner group, like learning how to surf. And I remember saying, like, one day I want to be good enough that I can sit in the lineup with her. And we surf together now. Like every Christmas we're sitting in the same lineup now, which is super fun. And so we were surfing this one spot that's kind of a bit of a dodgy spot. It's a river mouth, and ocean river mouths are dodgy spots. There's crocodiles, there's jellyfish, there's sea lice. The currents are really bad. And so you have to boat in. So we'd gone in on the boat. And if you've never boated into a wave, it's definitely a different feeling because you can't see the waves coming. So when you're going in from the beach, you can see what they're doing. But when you're coming at them from behind, I find it really freaky because I'm constantly looking over my shoulder as I'm paddling into the break. I'm like, is there a set? What's going on? And then at the end of your session, you don't get to just take the whitewater in. You're paddling back out to the boat and usually fighting the current. So at this spot in particular, it's a really hard paddle back to the boat when you're done. So you kind of have to keep in your mind, like, keep gas in the tank so you can get out of here. So anyway, we've had this session. The waves weren't huge, you know, 3 feet, maybe 4 feet. And I was like, okay, one more wave. I have enough gas in the tank to take a wave and then get back to the boat. So I get on this wave, paddle into it, start to drop in. And as I'm just getting up, I see directly in front of me, she had just finished her wave and is right in front of me, like too close. I have no time to get up and turn. Like, I'm going to kill her. And I'm like, I can't run over my friend. So I'm like halfway to popping up. I kind of like lay back down on my board and tried to like stall it out, like pull it up and stall it out. So I stopped my momentum. But just the way the lip like caught the board. So I'm now in a tumble in the wave,
Over the falls,
hoping
yeah.
I don't hit her because I have no idea where anything is anymore. And I just feel, just like Robin, I just feel this like blow to my leg. And I'm just like, oh, I don't know what that was. Could be her. So I come up, she's fine, didn't hit her. She's like, holy crap, we were close, but it was fine. And I'm like, yeah, but something hit my leg. Like, I got to get out of here. So I like hop on my board and just like paddle like hell. And then I can just feel my ankle is just like, I'm like, oh shoot, I think I broke my ankle. Like it's hurting so much. So I'm like paddling back to the boat as fast as I can, just like yelling at everyone on the break, like, I'm going to the boat, something happened to my foot. I get to the boat, you've got to like climb up there, these like, you know, old pangas, you've got to like climb up the side. It's 8 o'clock, we'd been surfing since 6 a.m. I climb into the boat and we have a cooler that always has beer in it. And the boat driver looks at me, he's a Spanish guy, looks at me, looks at my foot, kind of makes this face. And I just like open the cooler, I get 2 beers out, I open one, like chug it, take the other, and I put it on my ankle. Put it on my ankle. My ankle, no joke, was black, like the black, like not bruised, black. It wasn't broken. I mean, maybe I had some hairline fractures in there, but it wasn't broken. Got like the beer ice on it. Sat there for about half an hour. Everyone else eventually made their way back to the boat. And then the group decision was to go surf another spot. So then we boated to another spot, and then I surfed for 2 more hours.
No. Well, it's like get those like
it's amazing what
the blood flow circulating. So, yeah.
Yeah, it was
macrophages,
you know, having the Tanya, having the beer, and then the adrenaline. You don't want to stop surfing, and so So nothing terrible like Robin's experience, but it's, you know, all the little things add up. And I don't know if that was the right thing I did in that situation. I think it was. You know, I think it was my only option. So I think a lot of surfing is split-second decisions on how to protect yourself and others around you. Yeah. And you have to be quick because you don't have the time.
And learning to be like patient and, you know, keeping calm when you are stuck underwater is like a big thing. And like Shazia's right, it's like an accumulation of like, it's a bunch of little things that happen, and then they all add up with like, oh yeah, there was like this time, and then this little time, like this was fine, like I'm fine, but like it did happen. And you have to have that acknowledgement of like, you know, the stupid injury that it was, but you know, you still want to keep going. Like I remember this one time I was surfing in Costa Rica. It was actually like the trip where I was like, you know what, I need to overcome whatever happened to my face. And I was SUP surfing, and it was like sunset in Tamarindo. And I just remember like, you know, I fell off a wave, and I fell off the wave in like a weird way that like the leash got caught around my neck, but also was tangled by my paddle. So my paddle was like stuck against like myself, like here, and the leash was around it. So, and I was like double
the more you
choking.
pull, the more you strangle yourself.
Yeah. So I'm like strangling, and with the waves, like I was underneath, there's this just double strangle of like paddle leash, and thinking in my head, like, okay, just calm. It's okay. You'll pop right back up. And then, you know, came up and unraveled, and I was like, okay, that happened. Like,
I'm trying to get over my trauma, and
yeah, I'm like, okay. So I'm like, I'm okay. And I was very proud that, you know, I kept calm and, you know, did whatever I need to do. And I just, you know, kept on going. But like these tiny little things, like you don't forget them when they happen. And of course, this wave was like, you know, like half a foot tall. Like it wasn't even anything. And yeah, I find like the tiniest waves cause like the biggest problems when it comes to like dumb surf injuries or like board repair. It's like, yeah, this guy crashed into me, and now I have like a, you know, $200 ding on my board. How big was the wave? It was like, you know, flat. I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah, like a kite surfer just pierces your board, and you're like, great, like this is, and it's interesting. Like I was watching big wave wipeouts. Like it's kind of an addictive thing to do. It's this like really
watching those.
And one of the things that I was paying attention to is kind of like therapy is like, it's interesting, like your story, Shazia, where you're like, yeah, I had this huge bruise on my leg and I surfed another 2 hours. I took a beer. It kind of shut down my amygdala. And so I could just kind of like pursue, because it really is, it's like exposure therapy. So when you're left, and like obviously Robin, you have no choice. You're like, I'm being like shuttled off to a hospital to get stitches. But my last memory is like me prone looking down the face of the wave, and that's the last thing you remember. And your nervous system is like, last time we did that, this whole thing happened and it was danger and it was like, it was bad. So even though that's not what caused it, that's like what your nervous system remembers. And so every time you put yourself in that same position, it's like bad, abort, stop doing this. And so one of the things with these big wave wipeouts was they would be like shaking and like, okay, I'm okay. Like I'm changing the cartridge in my inflatable vest and I'm taking another wave. And you'd be like, that is insane. But it like, because these things can be so random, it's like just to reset the nervous system so it doesn't land on that last memory. But still, like, it's
good way of putting it.
Yeah, it's like life though. It's like,
and it's how do you make positive ones, right? Like, and then how do you replace those with like the good days and the joy of surfing with your friends, or like a rainbow comes out, or dolphins go by. I was surfing in Tofino last summer with a friend of mine, and the pod of whales came, and so how do you replace those types of things? My kitten's walking by. My kitten wants to be on the podcast. How do you replace the memories, and how do you also remember that even in the tough situations, like, you did the right thing, you did okay, it wasn't that bad. Like, I've had a number of leashes break in the ocean, and there's nothing scarier in that second than feeling the tug of the board and then nothing, and then you're like, my board's gone, I'm out here and my board's gone. And I've had it happen on a surfboard and a stand-up paddleboard. And on the paddleboard, then, that's where the drills have come in handy. Like, how do you swim to shore with a paddle and not get pummeled by a bunch of sets? Throw your paddle, swim to your paddle, throw your paddle, swim to your paddle. And so when things like that happen, how do you stay calm? And then I say, it was fine. Like, I was fine.
Yeah, but it's like the freaking out kind of makes it all worse, but it's still like, it reminds me, like, so hearing all these stories, and I'm kind of addicted to hearing these kind of stories. This is, again, knock wood. I don't even want to say it. I'm not something that bad happened, but I know I'm like, with only 2 years under my belt, I'm like, it's a matter of time. It's like riding a motorcycle. Like, it's a matter of time. But when I was living in Colombia, I'd be like, everyone in Colombia, at least in Bogota, where I was living for most of it, everyone's scared of getting robbed because everyone's had the experience of being robbed, just living on, in that city. I know, Shazia, you lived in Bogota too. It's like really.
Yeah, I was in Bogota too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so weird. From what years?
I never got robbed in Bogota. I
did one time. I was like, person I was with got robbed, and again, it was like that trauma thing of like, I'm calm, and then I look and someone's being robbed beside me, and I'm like, it came out of nowhere, and then you're just amygdala's like, this entire world is unsafe. But I remember being like, oh, this neighborhood seems safe, or this time of day seems safe, and then someone would quickly disrupt my sense of safety of being like, oh no, well, someone got his entire, everything he was carrying cleaned out, or this person got shot, and you're like, oh my gosh. So it was just this sense of like vigilance, and I don't want that to happen with surfing because it can kind of happen, but again, like, just being wise and like, maybe I'm not
get comfortable
on a 7-foot day when I don't really know what I'm doing, no matter how many rainbows are out.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things that when you're first learning, you don't have that sense of scale of what can happen. Like, the stupidest things I ever did were in the first year or two when I was learning, because I didn't have that sense of, oh crap, that's scary. And now I get scared probably more easily than when I first started learning, because I understand more what can happen. And I don't know if it felt the same for you, Robin, but like, I would paddle in anything when I first started.
Oh yeah, it's I think my fears have been calmed down because now I know how to mitigate the risk, and I have a lot more confidence in my skills. But to say that I don't have like fear is absolutely not. Like, I completely still feel fear, especially on days on like last Sunday, for example. Like, I had been surfing really chill summer waves for the last couple of sessions that I haven't been in, like, harrowing, blinding rain in a while. I know it sounds funny, but like, like I still have those days where, your heart is pumping extra because you can see the conditions but you're also excited. But at the same time, I always have this like dialogue in my head that says like, I've been through this, you've done this before, you've sustained worse, you'll be okay. But that level of fear is almost a sense of respect for the water, because you know that you're not going to push it so much that you will get hurt or you would get hurt. So like, you know that when you go out there, you're like, okay, I don't want to go to that spot because something might happen and I'm not cool with that right now. You know, you can be where you are and still feel confidence that nothing's going to happen. Now with beginners, like I didn't paddle out into everything when I was a beginner, because like that was like real fear. Like I was like, no, that's a hard no. I don't want to get out there. And I think part of like Surfistas is like we want to make sure that the ones who are beginners and stoked, sometimes that stoke will blind you and perhaps get you into a situation where you shouldn't be in. And if you want to push yourself and get into that situation and say, you know what, I am going to learn from this, then amazing. But not everyone is like that. You know, when you start seeing beginners going out on the cove and like a gale force wind and they're like, oh, this is my first day surfing. And you're like, no, don't do that.
The cove looks okay from the shore, but like once you're in, I've never surfed the cove. But
everything looks okay from the shore until you're there. And even on those like small days, you're like, I guess it's okay. But you don't really recognize what the current feels like when you're out there, and how stronger and how much of a not violent force, but this huge bits of all kinds of energy, wind energy, water energy, current energy, that's just pushing you in different directions. Plus your head is going like a mile a minute. Like, what am I doing here?
Right.
How the hell am I going to get back?
Yeah.
Those moments are necessary and a rite of passage, but I don't want to get it to the point, because there's so many more surfers out now, right, where somebody can get legitimately hurt. So, you know, pushing that education of like, you know, go where you feel comfortable, or where you do feel comfortable to push yourself in places where, you know, you feel like you can, you know, take it from the people who have surfed there. If they say that you have no place being here because like, you know, it's a crazy day, you might want to listen.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, you don't know what's under
getting
the water.
rid of ego.
Right.
Getting rid of the ego is and I think every surfer has to deal with that, with ego, because and that same type of ego is the same kind of ego where you're like, oh, I surfed in Costa Rica for a week on an 8-foot board, caught all the waves in the world. I'm coming back and I'm going to Surf Ontario and I'm going to buy like you know, 5'10". You're like, no. And you want to be like, I did it. And you're like, I am so stoked that you are happy, but please don't.
Like I do that all the time.
Yeah. I want you to continue to be happy. So, and surfing and chasing that joy. And sometimes that ego will, you know, lead you to go into places where you shouldn't, or buy equipment that's not correct for you.
Yeah, and that's the thing. There is a lot of ego around board size, right?
Yeah, it is.
It's kind of the opposite of.
I just posted that article. I just posted an article on the Surfistas group about that, which really resonated with me, because you know, there's this pull to either be like a kick-ass shortboarder, like keep dropping your board size, or if you're a longboarder, to like be able to do like all the cross stepping and all the tricks and stuff. And it, you know, often it can feel like those are the two goals. And you know, I would argue that no, like being a mid-length mediocre surfer is equally awesome. You know, being a SUP surfer, even if you don't have the smallest board, or even if you're not doing radical maneuvers, that's okay too, right? Like, how do we make it so like it's okay if those aren't your things? And like, I love my 8-foot single fin. Like, I will ride that board forever, even if I'm become some magically proficient, you know, expert surfer. That 8-foot single fin is like, it's magic. Robin's ridden it. It's a beautiful board.
It is a fun board.
Yeah, I've seen it. It's shaped by Grumpy Bob, right? Is that the Grumpy Bob board?
Yep.
Yeah, I have a 7.5.
I have a few of his boards.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's really cool too. And yeah, I mean, when I first, I trained, like learned on an 8.5 huge new surf project boat that you can't screw up on. It's like floating on your bed. Like eventually you can stand up. And then when I came here, I was like, it needs to fit in my car. And so it landed on a 7.5, and I could not lie on that board and paddle when I first went out. And I was so discouraged. And so that was the learning curve. I was like, can I lie on this board and just paddle on it without getting like flung off?
It is a discouraging feeling. Totally.
Yeah. You're like, I want to be successful.
Yeah.
And then
Sorry,
back
go
in
on.
Brazil during a surf camp that I just did, I was on an 8-foot board and in salt water, and everyone was trying to get down, and they were like, oh, but usually I surf a 6.5 or a 6'10" or like 5'10", and they're like, you know what, just we're trying to take pictures of you. We're trying to make you feel good about yourself. Just stay on the bigger board. And so like, I didn't even protest. I'm like, I'll just stay on the 8-foot, even though I need to learn how to ride my 7.5 when I'm on the lakes in less flotatious water. But yeah, there definitely is an ego thing around like, what's your smallest board?
Yeah, I find a lot of it's more of the guys that kind of go on about that. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's cute. It's cute sometimes. And but the stoke is there, and that's what kind of leads them. But yeah, and it's kind of also the reason why you'll find a lot of these boards like for sale on Kijiji like a year later kind of thing. Right. And you're like, surfed it twice, wasn't for me.
Right.
Quit surfing. And you're like, dude, if you stayed with that like 8-footer, you'd still be out there. But,
yeah, and you'd be catching so much more because you'd have a longer board. And I'll tell you guys how I found Lake Surfistas. It's kind of crazy. So I visited my friend who was in Costa Rica in 2019 in January. And so she just bought a place in Dominical, but she planned this kind of 3-month thing. I was like, I want to go on a trip. I want to learn how to surf and just kind of do something physical on a beach. So how about I just come and visit you for 3 weeks? She's like, okay, great. She's like, we're going to start off in Nosara, then go to Santa Teresa, and then Dominical. This is kind of the rough plan. You can like join whenever. So I join her. I take a couple lessons, and I'm surfing every day, but a lot of it is like me trying to figure stuff out on my own on her giant 8.5-foot board and like fighting in the whitewater. And, obviously the learning curve is really high. And so I'm like, there's no way, like what held me back from learning to surf on these surf trips is like, I'm never going to be able to practice these skills. Like I'll learn a couple things and then it'll be another year before I can surf again. And I met this girl, Victoria, in Santa Teresa. And she was like, oh, she was from Toronto and she's a psychotherapist with a practice right near me. I was like, this is really crazy. Oh, and, cool. And she was like, oh, like, you can surf in Toronto. I was like, what? I'm like imagining bathing suits and rash guards and the same kind of vibe, like, like, oh, okay. She's like, yeah, you can surf like on the lake. She's like, there's this group called Lake Surfistas. She's like, I'll send you the link for the Facebook group. I'm like, oh, amazing. Okay, like I'm gonna buy a rash guard, And then she's like, but just so the season is really it's all year, but it's really from September to March. And I was like, oh yeah, March to September. Yeah, makes sense. She's like, no. September to March in the winter. And I was just like, I don't know if it's the same thing, but I'm still so stoked because I was like, this is actually like there's a potential now to actually do this and maybe learn how to do this and have more experience on the water. And I was like, okay, if people are out there, like I don't, it must not be that bad, in terms of getting cold. And then you start looking at the pictures of everyone with their ice hanging off of their head and the whole thing. And
it can be that cold.
Yeah, you're like, how bad could it be? Like if people are there, And so I think I went to Surf Ontario pretty quickly. Oh, I checked it out and I saw people one day at the lighthouse and I see like these pretty good looking waves. I think it was like a really good day in February. And I just saw this kind of community, like people saying hi to each other, all these like black seals, like black sleek wetsuits, like just a very interesting, like snow everywhere. My dog is with me. He's just shaking. He's so miserable. And I'm like, wow, okay, this is great. And so I'm like, but in order to start, I have to get equipment. So I kind of just took the plunge, went to Surf Ontario, got set up with Kristen. She sold me all my stuff. It's like, okay, $1,500. I better like this. I hope my stuff's not on Kijiji in like a week. And then, the first day, I think I went out in like March or April to Ashbridges Bay and just couldn't even lie on my board, the wetsuit. Like it wasn't cold, but it was just, I was like, oh no. And then I maybe tried a couple more times. I missed out last summer because I just didn't know how to forecast or understand what was happening. And I would see people kind of posting pictures after the fact and be like, oh no, I thought people would like say where they're going before and that kind of thing. And then I went to the Lake Surfistas weekend in I think it was September or October last year.
Yeah.
And it was so amazing. Yeah, because there's such an amazing vibe. Like you guys threw such a great event. It was at Pleasant Beach on Erie. And immediately, yeah, like there's just this stoke that happens afterwards where like people were forming groups. So there's like a few Facebook chat groups I have now where like people are
Yeah.
you know, just making plans to go out, like finding surf buddies. Because so many times before that weekend I would go out and I'd be the only one, and I'd be like, I'm not going in the water. You know, it's a stormy day, there's not even anyone on the beach, like this is way too sketchy. And then I'd kind of go
Yeah.
home like in my wetsuit, sweating, having to pee, like dejected. But then after that Surfista weekend, yeah, there's this connection with these other women, and then you meet people as you're surfing. You start to learn, like you throw forecasting workshops, you can get better at it, and it's like actually been what allowed me to even be able to do this. So it was so great. It was like a really transformative thing
Aw,
that you have, you know. And so I
That's
know, like Robin, you're
amazing.
like, when I first
awesome.
started, it was just like people being like, you have no place being here, and you know, like, and so you're like fighting against that energy. And I
Yeah,
think if I had to deal with that
yeah,
energy, I
Our
probably,
goal is to make it the opposite.
yeah,
yeah.
totally. And you really have, like, it's a really awesome community. And I was rooming with these two girls who I didn't know. Like, I think we just connected on Facebook. We were rooming at Shirkston because we didn't get a chance to camp in the cabins,
Okay.
Pleasant Beach campground. So we're staying at Shirkston, which is great. And we all went into Pleasant Beach the next day for the actual day. And this girl who was staying with me, she was like, everyone's so friendly. She's like so excited.
Aw.
Everyone's so nice. It's true. It was so great.
Great. And this year's been an interesting journey for us to figure out what it means to do it when we're not all together, because that energy is such an important part of it. So the team's been really trying to figure out how do we do it virtual, and there's upsides too, right? Like that means
Yeah.
people don't have to travel. We can get more people from further distances participating. We have some really exciting stuff planned, like a number of workshops, you know, some really interesting discussions, and we're hoping lots of people join them.
Yeah.
So yeah, this year's going to be exciting, I think. So we've been working on some workshops to do virtually. You know, I think the whole pandemic's been a learning curve for people to figure out. We're getting used to it. Like that's the good thing. People have figured out how to stay connected, how to keep with their communities, and so we're trying to look at it as the opportunity to say, as much as it was nice when everyone could travel and come together, we also know a significant portion of the folks in Surfistas couldn't come. Like either they just don't have access to the cars or they don't live close enough. And so this year we're thinking we're going to hold a number of workshops. Forecasting is always one of the most popular things. And no matter how many times we do it, it's always good to have that refresher. So that's going to be one that we're really stoked about. That'll be Robin and I doing that one. We're going to have another one about stand-up paddleboarding that Jordana and Diana are going to run. That one, I think, will be really good because they're both certified instructors. They can talk a lot about that. We're also looking to do a board review, and we're super stoked for the board review. We're going to do it as a brunch. So like everyone grab your breakfast and join us with your coffee. Cool. And we're going to do it both from Toronto and the East Coast. So we're going to bring together in one surfista's backyard, so probably Charlotte's backyard in Toronto, all the local surfistas safely will distance and bring their boards, the organizing crews, so like Robin and such. And then out here on the East Coast, we're gonna come to my backyard for part of it and show video from here, look through my boards, and hopefully I'll get a couple of the other folks out here on the East Coast to join, so like Ali and maybe Alex and Krista. So I'm hoping that'll be interesting for people, but we're really excited to make these interactive workshops happen. So Robin, you know, just talking through how we get people engaged, and it's really, I think, going to be an exciting opportunity, and maybe we'll be able to add more. So there's the 3 that we have so far, but maybe we can get more on the roster too.
Yeah, I mean, there's I know a couple, like Taylor was talking about like surf and hair. I know, Shazia, you don't have hair, but like that's still like, you know, it's still relevant. And like I think there's been a lot of people who want to get involved and provide what they know about surfing to like the collective, you know, all the collective minds of forecasting and, you know, all the basics and stuff, but then stepping it up to things like mental health and, you know, beauty and, you know, self-care and that kind of stuff. It's awesome that it's branching out to that way. And maybe that's where we're heading, you know, because of lockdown and because we can't all be together. I can't wait for the next time that we all are together for, you know, for the next event, Lake Surfistas 2030. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. After there are no more viruses on the planet.
Yeah. But yeah, it's crazy to see how much this has all evolved in so many years. Like, when I started this, I never, ever imagined or dreamed that it would be the way it is now. Like, seeing it from, like, I feel like a proud mama, like, truly, like, that's like, seeing groups of women that are forming, you know, their own crews and, you know, sharing knowledge with each other. And gosh, it's like awesome. And I that's was always kind of like the point, because I wanted to do right by this community by having Ladies of the Lakes, and, you know, having worked at Surf Ontario for so long, that I wanted to provide the right information, because I was provided with nothing, and as well as pushback. So, you know, and when you have that and you've pushed through it and you're like, no, this is something I want to do, and you kind of finally figure it out, you know, I could have kept it to myself. And there are times when I do keep it to myself, because I feel like that was my discovery. But for the most part, there's so much information that that we all want to share. And that's the most important thing. And that's what makes community.
Mm-hmm. It's also like educating people how to participate and enter the community too, right? Like, you don't want the person paddling out at the cove with their foam hitting people. So just to create a culture around surfing on the lakes is really great too, you know?
Yeah. And it's like, to that person who's surfing the foamy, you know, at the cove at the first time, it's like, you know, we still want you to be part of the community, but like, if you learn from this kind of incident, then you'll see how much happier you'll make yourself and everyone else too. Like, there is that kind of unwritten rule of etiquette. And, you know, I know that localism is not the awesomest thing, but like, in terms of the way it was sort of seen as bullying back in the day. But I think if you are going to be a local at your spot, wherever you may be, you have a responsibility to tell anyone else that comes in what they should know as a local. That should be what localism is. Like, if I want to redefine it as that, where you're like, hey, I've never seen you before. Be careful for that rock over there, because it does this kind of a thing. Or, hey, if you come back here on this kind of wind, you'll have even a better time. Or, you know, and knowing your spots and knowing where you are, and accumulating that knowledge with the more places that you do surf, means that you can share that wealth of information for others who may not know. Yeah, I think that's
and I think it's about respect.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. It's like, you're just,
like,
it's
respect for the stories,
for the history, the people, and the people who are sharing it with you. You know, I certainly didn't find everything by myself. You know, the people told me what I needed to know, and it was a lot harder to find these people. But the ones who did step up and say, you know what, this is what you need to know. These are the things that you need to remember, this and that. I'm very super grateful for that knowledge, and that for them sharing it to me, because there were people that didn't share. And there still are some people that don't share.
It's like,
I think
the
part
elders.
of too, if we do Surfistas right, it should be sustainable indefinitely, whether we're around or not, right? Like, that's the goal, is to build that culture of respect for what people have built and done in the community, and then sustainably teaching people to continue it, right? Like, these groups of women that are building their own little crews, like, they're the future of sustaining Surfistas, whether there's a formal community organization or not. And I think that's the goal of Surfistas, and then not losing that history, not losing the richness of the people that surfed the lake 50, 60 years ago, and making sure we're still telling those stories, and that they live on. So I think the Surfistas has a big part of that, to keep it alive, and to keep it sustainable.
It's like carrying on the legacy.
Yeah. And it's not a very long legacy of, like, Great Lakes surfing. Like, if you think about you know, the timelines of surf culture in places like Hawaii or California, or anywhere else in the world in the ocean, it feels like these were set up long time ago, back in, you know, the 1800s, and all these accounts. So Great Lakes surfing is relatively new. And even though people have been surfing here for like 50, 60 years, it really wasn't a big thing until, maybe the 80s and 90s with the small groups of crew that did it, like the Bridge Crew and Wildwood and, people in what's that thing in Wisconsin? The Sheboygan people, and there weren't a lot of women. So it's like, we are that evolution of the surf culture here. And and having it keep going, plus respecting everything else about it and the people that are, that really were the pioneers is, as Shazia said, it's the best way to get to, for the newcomers and the people who want to surf to do it the right way.
Right. Yeah. This is so great, guys. And when's the weekend? When's the Surfista weekend? Maybe people can check it out. And if they're thinking about joining the Great Lakes community,
so we've got 3. This should probably go live soon. I have all the prep work.
It's going to be August 17th.
August 17th for the for SUP Online 101, okay. And then forecasting is Tuesday, September 22nd, and then we've got board and gear review on the 26th. And though we're not necessarily like advertising or anything, but there will be a couple of us who will be paddling at A Bay or Woodbine Beach, whatever the conditions give us on that day. On the 26th, Talia, you are invited to go in, go for like a flat water paddle or a surf, or just play in the waves, just a very small, or whoever can come, group of us hanging out on the beach in Toronto.
Amazing. Yes. And so we'll put the link for the Facebook group and the link for your website so people can find you. But thank you guys so much for joining me and for creating and participating in and carrying on the legacy of Lake Surfistas, because it's really been really helpful for my mental health. And yeah, it's been like a life-changing thing, I think, for me, for sure. And for a lot of women I know in the community too.
We're happy to hear it. You know what? And you're the epitome of it. Like, you're getting out. You're you are getting out there. You are chasing it. You have been in 3 lakes in the past couple of weeks. So that's
3 lakes in 4 days. I did a.
That's amazing. That's so amazing. You're like the exact thing that we're trying to, the culture that we're trying to make here, because it's also so personal to you. So thank you for, keeping it going and making it, being part of the awesomeness of it. Like, thanks, Talia.
Thank you.
And thank you for having us today. It was awesome to talk about it and tell stories. Storytelling is a huge part of the community, so we really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, totally. It's like to thicken the experience. It's like, this isn't just a group of people that surf together. There's a history behind it, and and even I'm just thinking of the Andy Holland's property on H Bay. Like, now I'm thinking, like, how is there a beach fire? There's no beach there anymore.
I know, there used to be.
I know. Yeah. So sad. Maybe there will
Amazing.
Be. But so thank you guys so much, and have a great Sunday.
Thank you.
I'm going to try and head out for the waves right now, actually.
Sarah, what's the...
Go
if you can.
On Erie, so we'll see.
There's not much here. Go to Erie. Get out of here.
Yeah, go to Erie. Okay. I'll see you guys. Thank you.
Take care.